Hi and hello watch fans, and welcome to another edition of The Real Time Show with me, your friendly neighbourhood watchmaker, and my co-host calling in all the way from Amsterdam, Alain Ben-Joseph. Today we are joined by a very important man indeed from the Fondation Haute Horlogerie, Pascal Ravessoud, a good friend of Alain. So I'm going to kick it over to my co-host to welcome our illustrious guest to the studio and ask the first questions. Alain, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rob. Cheerful and perfect as usual. Pascal, good to have you. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Alan. Hey, Rob. I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the air. I pride myself in calling your friend for quite some time. It was great to see you in Geneva during the Watches and Wonders Fair. And I congratulate you in person last time I saw you, but I want to do it officially on air. You are the vice president of the Fondation de la Haute Horlogerie. Although it's VIP, you are actually the co-leader of the foundation. Tell us what the FHH is, please.
With pleasure. So, Fondation Haute Horlogerie was founded in 2005 by three big players in the watch industry. The Richemont Group, Audemars Piguet, and Gérard Perregaux, with the aim to spread the watchmaking culture in general. And so we did so through four pillars until very recently. One of these pillars is the Watches and Wonders show, formerly SIHH, that has become quite big and, kind of shadowed a little bit the three other pillars. So today, as of February this year, the FHH remains with these three other pillars, and Watches and Wonders have formed a separate foundation, as you might know.
I do indeed. And ever since I know you, you've been with the FHH, but you also bear the title of President of the Cultural Council. Is that one of the three pillars?
Actually, our three pillars, it's a bit complicated. So I go step by step. So the three pillars we have is what we call Watches and Culture, which is, let's say, everything related to watch knowledge for a public that starts from really the beginning of the journey. It's a neutral resource of information where you can find everything you dreamed to ask about watchmaking. Then the second pillar is our academy. We have a training academy for almost 10 years now, where we train on watch culture. It started mainly by B2B, and now adding a strong component on direct-to-consumer information and training programs. The third pillar being the forum. We run a forum that is a platform for discussion and debate, mainly for the professionals, for more than 10 years now. And the Cultural Council is, let's say, an external body. It's a kind of a think tank composed of a few dozen experts that are each expert in their field, like retailers, historians, editors, everything that is gravitating around our industry, but nobody from the brands or the groups. So this external think tank that I have the honor of presiding is a pro bono participation to the watchmaking culture, if you wish.
For our dear listeners, I've known Pascal for quite some time, and he's a real watch nerd. You go way back, and you go the full spectrum from vintage to ultra modern. So you really are the embodiment for me for the Fondation. Walk us through what you do. How does your day look like?
Wow, first, such an honor to be your focus point in the in the watch collecting world. Well, first, I've been with the foundation for 15 years now. I think I haven't had 2 days the same, so it's pretty difficult for me to describe what is a day. Well, more generally speaking, I am in charge. We have three pillars. I'm in charge of one of the pillars, the forum, and also from the cultural council, which could be deemed as a fourth pillar, but it's not a pillar per se. It's really a think tank kind of operation. And so I'm also in charge of representing the FHH. So all the communication aspects. And together with my colleague, Aurélie Strelt, we are really co-heading the FHH. So she's in charge of the two other pillars, so Watches and Culture and the Academy. And so we form a work couple that is quite interesting because we are very complementary. And we have let's say our forte are in different fields. And it's a very dynamic way of let's say managing the FHH day to day, because we have a lot of exchange. It's very dynamic, and we try to use our forte when it makes sense. It reinforces us because we're challenging each other quite a lot. So it's a very I think a very clever way of managing things.
That's very interesting. So many listeners, they usually Google or type in websites while they're listening to our episodes. To walk them through a few, the main website for the FHH is hautehorlogerie.org, which spells HAUTEHORLOGERIE.org. Any other URLs I should point out, Pascal?
No, Alan, you're totally right. And as we speak, you know that we are finishing a total revamping of our digital platform. And so it has been in the works for the last 12 months. It's going to be looking very new as soon as this episode is online, I guess.
That's amazing. So we kind of have breaking news on this website?
Yes. The launch date is end of April. So you'll find on our website a lot of resources, as I said, for all the public, from the beginners stage up to advanced. And also you'll find a lot of information about the FHH, and so you can have a better understanding of everything that is FHH related, as well as our partner brands. You know, we have 42 partner brands, and this is the second breaking news. There are going to be 2 more joining us very soon, in the next few days. Maybe I can talk to you about.
Please do.
So we have Kermit joining us, basically. Boris is joining the FHH. So very happy about that.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And the second brand is Gérald Charles, that you probably know about. Gérald Genta's late brand development. When his brand was bought, he continued to create under this Gérald Charles brand. And so the people running the brand now are trying to bring his legacy with the still bold design, complicated movements, proprietary movements, and it's a quite interesting small brand to follow. They're coming up strong.
Those that are listening and that actually work in the watch industry, we have quite some listeners that are professionally active in the watch industry as well, not just collectors. And why can't you have both hats on? If a brand would want to be eligible to become a partner, how do they go about?
Well, they can ask us directly. Our partners, basically, they support us financially for all the projects we have. So our 3 pillars, they are co-funded by the partner brands, and so provided that it is not, a brand that is either too young or of, I would say, a range that is really entry level, we'll have a review with the Cultural Council whether the brand is actually following I would say the values of our fine watchmaking manifesto, and then provided they are okay with this, then we can accept the brand in the circle of the partners.
Are you guys really totally independent?
We are, of course, totally neutral, and this is the main point. And of course, we come from one side of the business, and our aim is also to open up the governance a bit more. Today, we have a few representatives of our partner brands in our board. So I think unless we have the whole industry following us and participating, we'll never be 100% independent, I guess. But we are striving to do everything, and I really mean it, in a neutral way, so that we don't favor any brand in particular. And it goes as far as telling our partner brands that we are actually not going to promote them actively, because actually the main point for us is to become, a neutral resource, and therefore to be credible. We will not be able to accept specific money or arrangement with one brand or the other. The idea is really to show a balance of all the brands we have. And sometimes when we do articles on, on a specific subject, let's take a tourbillon, for example, or the history of a specific complication, we'll just tell the history as it is, not based on the partnership we have with one brand or another.
That sounds like it might take quite an awful lot of diplomacy, but I suppose that after 15 years in the role, you've become quite adept at walking those necessary lines. But tell me, how did you become so adept at that? Do you have a background in politics, or have you worked with multiple group brands before? Like, what's the story about your career before you joined the FHH?
Well, no politics before. It came along the way. I have an MBA background, so I'm a genuine generalist, and this also translates into my watch collecting habits. And Alan knows it. I'm very open and actually curious about everything watches, and I have no boundaries, I would say, and no allegiance per se. I started my career in communications, in a communication agency, event management. So I worked for many different industries, pharmaceutical, IT, etc., and of course, watchmaking. I used to organize events for Patek Philippe, for Raymond Weil at the time, and for the SIHH. And so all of a sudden, I find myself in the corporate world through Harry Winston. So I started really in watchmaking, running the communication marketing for the watch division at Harry Winston, like almost 20 years ago. And the one hiring me was Max Busser. And I thank him ever and ever for having had the guts to take an outsider in the watchmaking world. And so I hope he doesn't regret that. And then a few years later, I joined a former client at SIHH who hired me, and 15 years ago. So I guess being in the middle of all these brands all this time, I could learn the virtues of patience and diplomacy. But I'm Swiss, so Swiss people are are mild and dedicated, and they listen and they don't overreact. That's the theory, of course. But I'm also half Italian, so believe me, on the road, I'm more an Italian than a Swiss. But this also fills me with passion and with a will to discover and to be really passionate about watches. That is all about.
Well, I guess that comes in handy as well. I mean, having that fierier side to your personality must be necessary. I mean, you must have to call on it every so often, because it's not like you work with a bunch of shrinking violets, is it? I mean, the industry is composed of some strong characters, let's put it that way.
Definitely. But I think along the way, I always try to see the positive in things. And I think it's not a wrong approach, especially as myself. I don't have a big ego, to be honest, and I can listen to many things and try to see things with a kind of a distance. And I think this helped me having this approach that is not kind of how you say jusqu'au boutiste in French is really going just for the sake of going into the argument, but trying to balance out things and see where is the positive.
That I concur. You definitely don't have a big ego. You actually have a great sense of humor for a Swiss gentleman, but the half Italian explains a lot. And if Max is listening, bless you, Max, because you did yourself, us, and the whole watch collecting community a big favor for bringing Pascal O in. So not Jackie O, but Pascal O. So that's amazing. And I didn't know that story of that piece of history. So it's actually cool you shared that. Thank you, Pascal. So I want to talk a bit about the watches culture aspect of the foundation. So you guys had a very cool Instagram handle, but where should we direct our dear listeners on Instagram to today?
We are going to launch also in a few days a more corporate account on Instagram called Fondation Haute Horlogerie. So we've actually the IG you're referring to is the Watches and Culture Instagram account that we launched a year ago as a kind of a test, actually, because we wanted to cater to a younger generation and to make them aware of traditional watchmaking through their kind of channels. I mean, their habitual channel. So this has worked out quite well because we gained more than 15,000 followers kind of organically in a few months. And so we are continuing this, but it's more an experimental kind of thing. And our corporate account is really following here in the next few days. So,
do you know the handle already, Pascal? Can we mention it already? Because
no, not yet. It's really in the making, but you will find it very easily through the research
of the website and the homepage.
Yeah,
amazing. Because I actually like that test account you guys had. You made it. The beauty of it is you guys have a helicopter view of the watch industry, where you go from super Genesis style of history of watchmaking, which you have amazing articles on your website, to very relevant niche segments of watch collecting. You and I went to the exhibition at the Geneva Fairgrounds, which was actually a very cool photo exhibition about time and time-telling devices. So that was very cool. Using that as a segue, could I be this blunt and bold and state that without the FHH, we don't really would have had SIHH, so the fair, which now is revamped into Watches and Wonders?
Well, actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. The SIHH predates the FHH. It was first, the history of the SIHH first was a kind of a spin-off of Cartier and a couple of other brands from Baselworld. It was 32 years ago, I guess. Yes, 1991, because at the time Cartier was not happy about the quality of the watch fair back then in Basel, and so they formed their own fair in Geneva, and it was organized by Cartier. It was still the Vendôme luxury group, so it was really predating Richemont by a few years. And so it was kind of a homemade small salon. I think the first year you had 3 brands, Cartier, Piaget, and Baume & Mercier, something like that. They were joined later, by the way, by Gérald Genta and Daniel Roth, quite amusingly. And then you even had the Breguet at some point, just before it was bought by Swatch Group. Anyway, long story short, it was becoming too big for Cartier. And so they formed the CIHH, the Comité International de la Haute Horlogerie, which was in charge of the SIHH organization for a few years, and then it changed and became the FHH a few years later. 2005, actually, that was really the birth of the FHH. So it has been a constant evolution, if you wish. But the idea behind the FHH, 2005 was 5 years into the new millenary. And there was a time where, haute horlogerie was really booming. It was the first years you were referring to haute horlogerie or high horology, and nobody really understood what it meant, because it meant nothing. It was not protected. It was not even defined. And the whole idea behind the foundation was to have an institution that will actually inform on haute horlogerie, try to define what it is, or at least try to round up the values and the criteria, and inform the final client, so that false claims of brands being haute horlogerie were debunked. And actually, I think it has been since the inception of the FHH, the idea has been to show what is true and what is not, and being a point of reference. That was what I wanted to say.
And that's amazing. And you actually went straight to the heart of the raison d'être, the reason of existence for you guys. So you helped form the definition of haute horlogerie. So what is that today, Pascal?
With watchmaking, everything is complicated, right? So it took us quite some time and a lot of brilliant minds to try to define what is haute horlogerie, because the watchmaker is the only engineer that likes things complicated, right? Every other engineer I know tries to simplify things, try to make it as straight as possible. And the watchmakers, they take pride in making things complicated. And so it goes with the definition of haute horlogerie, because it's actually quite complex. And to summarize it to one sentence, it's basically excellence in watchmaking. It's the subtle combination between the watchmaking arts, so everything that is technical, finishing techniques, decoration, etc., and the applied arts, that is everything, all the arts and crafts linked to decoration, finishing, but in the artistic way, like miniature painting, like all these marquetry, all these métiers d'art that have been applied to haute horlogerie lately. Actually, we have defined 30, roughly 20-30 criteria that are an indication of this excellence being present. But of course, the criteria that we have defined in the Fine Watchmaking Manifesto that will be on our website soon is an indication, is when you have all these criteria present, you're really in front of a product that is truly exceptional. But where is the line between haute horlogerie and the rest? Well, we've tried to define that for a few years, and we even went into an evaluation of brands, but it was so difficult to have a common understanding of where this basis is that we just stopped, because it wasn't making any sense. I don't know, Alan, you probably, like you, Rob, have visited many different manufacturers, and any manufacturer you visit is different to some extent to another, because they have another approach, another way of making things. A manufacturer with focus on the precision, the other one on the finishing of a certain piece, the other one on making all the possible components. And so the focus is different, because every brand is different and every brand DNA is different. And so trying to summarize that into a definition, believe me, well, it's not possible. It's just not.
But you guys came the closest I've ever seen. I think that I've seen the preliminary research document of that manifesto that you're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
And that was amazing. And it was encompassing. I think it was the most extensive research I've seen. So I highly recommend to our fellow watch nerds listening to find that on hautehorlogerie.org. Now, to raise another definition that there's actually a lot of uncertainty about and is being used and misused by watch brands in the watch industry, which is the title or term manufacture. When, dear Pascal, is a watch or caliber manufacturer or not, in your personal opinion? And or, yeah,
What the hell?
We're going deep.
Putting him on the spot here. I'm sorry, Pascal.
No. It's interesting, Alan, because I saw you coming. I know it would be the next question. Well, basically, we've tried the same for manufacturer as we tried for haute horlogerie, and coming with the definition that would have a common agreement on. And it was very difficult because manufacture, the term in itself is actually done by hand, right? Doesn't mean much in a dimension of a modern brand today, right? Because, of course, you have some sort of hand finishing, but you can argue that some is difficult to define. At which point do you become a manufacturer when you do a lot of finishing by hand or not? It depends also because you don't do that the same for all your products. Because let's say if you have 10 different products, well, you don't do these products the same because they're probably not of the same range, etc., etc. Basically, the agreement within the industry to become a manufacturer is to do your own movement. But again, you have many brands that have their own movement, but don't put their own movements in all their products. So is there a ratio of in-house movement versus movements bought outside? It's also very difficult to say. I'm sorry, I'm not helping you here, but just to give you a sense, I think for me, at least, a manufacturer is doing at least one of their own movements integrally in-house.
It's an interesting wrinkle to sort of add to the conversation, because I know we were trying to simplify it and we might actually have made it more complicated, because you raise an interesting point that I hadn't ever really considered, that the aspect of the manufacture does hint some kind of handcraft. Never dawned on me at all, which is embarrassing, as someone regards themselves as relatively competent in English. But now I see that we have another issue here, because when we look at movement categorization in brands, we tend to think of three definite tiers, and you could have bought-in or off-the-shelf movements like an ETA 2824 or a Salita 200 series or whatever, or a Soprod or a Le Jouperet, etc., etc. Then you could have a proprietary caliber, which is exclusive caliber developed and made for one brand and one brand alone by a movement specialist. And then there is an in-house, or, as I've always used interchangeably, manufacture caliber, which is made by the brand itself in the majority. We don't expect any brand to make everything to call it an in-house or manufacture movement. But now I'm faced with the prospect that a proprietary caliber could really be a manufacture caliber, and an in-house caliber may not have any hand finishing at all. Really doesn't necessarily need any of those components, so that might not be manufactured after all. So I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and believe me, even when you take off-the-shelf movements, I mean, some brands personalize them so much that is it really? What is it basically? Is it a proprietary movement? Is it an in-house caliber? No, probably not, because actually the heart of the caliber was bought, but it goes with so much personalization that it's really, again, difficult to describe. I mean, I just remember here, top of my mind, a very simple thing, IWC using 7750 from Valjoux as a basis for a very complicated watch. And I think it was it a minute repeater or something? And I mean, it was absolutely making no sense to use such a caliber in such a piece, but they did it so, and they modified it so heavily that, I mean, half of the people could not even recognize the base caliber that they used. So, again, I think what is interesting though is to see the end result, because we've had this discussion with the cultural council so many times, and with brands and with journalists, the same. Is it more important to have a caliber done in house, or all your calibers done in house, versus having a highly specialized motorist doing them for you? I mean, what's the best in the end consumer interest? Well, this is also a balance, because there are clients that prefer that the calibers is done in house, because it's very important for them that the brand is producing the movement. But someone that is motorist and is doing only that, it's probably to be argued that they do things probably on a better standard than people who do the movements and do some other parts and are doing the whole manufacturing process in an industrial way. So I guess again, difficult to be definitive in essentials.
Well, it's interesting. Now you've started us down this path of shades of grey when we were looking for black and white. We might as well explore it further, because it is really interesting. Because you raise a very good point there. Like, what is in the interest of the end consumer, or maybe we should say collector in this case, or perhaps both, because they might want something different. Recently, I was talking to a big focus group of watch buyers, guys that buy all kinds of watches from all different price points. And I said, what do you prefer? What are you looking for in a caliber? Because I personally, as a watchmaker and a watch collector, always like novelty and interest and distinction and character in my calibers. I want to turn my watches over and see something through that caseback that I can't see through 100 other casebacks. And that could even just be something as simple as a heavily modified base caliber, like you mentioned, off the shelf. But we'll get back to that, because what I really enjoy are proprietary calibers or in-house / manufactured calibers. And I like that because I like that aesthetic and sometimes technical differentiation. But a lot of the feedback I got was that consumers are actually quite put off, especially in newer brands. When a new brand steps up to a proprietary movement and goes somewhere like Chronode or Concepto, for example, and has a fancy super duper new aesthetic caliber created especially for them, because the buyer thinks, well, what if this brand isn't around in 10 or 15 years time? What's going to happen then? And although the obvious answer, or the logical one at least, is that, oh, the manufacturer of that caliber, whoever they may be, will still likely be in existence long after the brand, should that brand fail, and they will be able to service and refinish your caliber where necessary, even though it might cost you an arm and a leg. And then going back to the original point that you made about nothing to be said against off-the-shelf or base calibers because they can be heavily modified, at what point does that modification overtake the origin of the movement, which has then in some ways been treated like an bush caliber, like a movement that has been bought almost for its parts and harvested and completely redesigned and aesthetically reimagined? Where is the moment where, what is it they say? The axe that beheaded Anne Boleyn has had 5 new handles and 10 new blades, but it's still the axe that beheaded Anne Boleyn, or Charles I, whoever it was they used in that example. When's that point? Is it the balance wheel itself? Is it the gear train? Is it the mainspring? What do you think? Or is it just a case of it being down to every individual movement?
I mean, as far as I am in my knowledge journey, it's so difficult to be definitive in this, because again, you think, I mean, the collectors' habits and triggers and soft points are very diverse. They are diverse because the humanity is diverse, and it's very difficult to put things into cans and to generalize. For some, if the basics of the movement, basically the layout of the balance wheel, the bridges, and the gears, that actually you cannot change. You can improve everything else if you wish, but the basic mechanics of the movement you can't. Using that, it will put them off. And I don't really see a tipping point where it becomes acceptable or not, because for me, when you have a Unitas 6497 heavily modified, skeletonized, etc., there's a lot of effort and craftsmanship put into that, especially if then it's finished by hand. So the value is actually done by the human hand, and this adds a lot of value to the movement. So does it add credibility? Again, it's a personal question. Does it add I would say a personalization that is such that actually it's kind of a one of a kind movement? Maybe for some it's not acceptable because at the end of the day it's still a Unitas, and for some that's the most beautiful things they've seen in the world. Here, I think the personal choice is really key, and it's good because there is really something for all kind of collectors.
So that's interesting. So if personal is the key, I want to ask you, as a personal collector, taking the official hat off, do you care, Pascal, if it's hardcore manufacturer or a bit manufacturer, or is the handmade aspect important for you as a collector, or how do you even collect?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Yeah, it's a good question, Alan, because I always ask myself, what kind of collector am I, since I know actually the industry, not inside out, but I've seen quite a lot of things like you guys have. So would I actually settle only for the exceptional? Well, my budget first and my personal taste says no. Actually, I discovered along the way that my collecting style is more around pieces that makes me tick at first sight, meaning being attractive to the eye and making me smile, right? And these are usually more sports chic watches, and this would really definitely be my collection core. When I start to add complications to them, and especially handmade, first it goes much up the ladder in terms of budget, and then it's a choice. Would I rather have one very special watch rather than 3-4 that I like very well? Then again, the question is more having the choice of more simple watches, and for me, I appreciate certainly the hand aspect and the hand finishing and these métiers d'art, etc. And I really find it amazing, and the reservoir of capabilities and artistry that we have in watchmaking is immense, is second to none. But it's not my personal taste in terms of collecting.
Talking of your personal taste in collecting and the brands that you have been keeping an eye on over the past 15 years of being very up close and personal with the industry, are there any newer, up-and-coming independents, or maybe even group brands, if there is such a thing, that you would love to see join the FHH in an official capacity in the near future?
I will give you a very political answer, but really, FHH is open to everyone. We welcome everyone, and we would certainly hope all the major players in watchmaking will join us, because really this project is about, maintaining the interest for centuries-old industry that is actually very disconnected in a very connected world. And for me, it is more important to have a common effort towards bringing the new generation on board and trying to make them understand the beauty and the magic of these beautiful timepieces in general, than really focusing on one or the other brand.
Okay. Well, let me rephrase that question to try and sidestep the incredible political spin you put on that one. Kudos, by the way. I'm impressed. 15 years well spent. Who do you identify from either a personal or professional perspective, whichever hat allows you to answer this question, as the major players in the next generation of haute horlogerie?
There are many interesting independent brands that I've witnessed for a few years. It's not going to be a big surprise for you, but when I see the creativity and the style that H. Moser is developing in their own way, it's quite impressive. They really do a good job. They are already partners, by the way. We of course have witnessed the impressive rise of François Paul Journe, and I think he really has made a case on its own. And so now the huge hype we see on the pieces is probably well earned, because it has been very consistent. I mean, F. Journe was one of the first independent watchmaker to set foot and try to establish himself in a world that was dominated by the majors, and he actually set his pace, established his style, and is still limiting his quantities under 1,000 pieces, which is remarkable. And now I think it's been widely recognized. Definitely would love to have François Paul Journe on board in our partners. Although I know it's not always easy to work with. What would I say? I was quite interested by the work of Ressence. Ressence has a point of view that is quite different. Benoit Mantiens, being an industrial designer, he has approached watchmaking in a different way that the majority of watchmakers do, and it has given an edge to Ressence's identity that is quite unique, in my view.
That's a very interesting choice. And funnily enough, I was while I was listening to you, I was just sort of idly scanning my desk, and my eyes fell upon the Ressence press kit from Watches and Wonders, because Alain and I met with Benoit again, and we love him. We think what he does is really, really interesting from a aesthetic and from a technical perspective. And we spoke to him about pursuing some kind of collaboration or shared project for the real-time show, because our visions are aligned of what would be nice to bring to watchmaking. And I think that he has the right kind of 1,000-foot perspective, shall we say, as you alluded to, because of his background as an industrial designer. And it's interesting that that's where he comes from, because so many younger watch brands are founded by men and women with this career path, and it does bring a fresh pair of eyes to the industry, which I think was, very much needed.
Yes, definitely. No, definitely. I think Benoit has a different take, and it really opens up, I think, a new perspective. Of course, I was to add Max and his incredible work with the BNF. It's not the new kid on the block by any means. He's one of the well-established independents. But I think what he achieved was actually, leading the pack of all this creativity that you can find today in the younger independents or let's say newer independent brands. And he has the merit of having developed something completely new based on collaborations, and it was really before the collaborations were the norm, right? And so this, of course, I'm ever admirer of Max and all the friends and all the collaboration he has done in a very special way. And I wanted to add the latest kid on the block, actually, that is Trilob. Trilob is, as you know, a very young, actually, brand from Paris that also has the merit to see things a little bit differently, more poetically, but still with a horological background. And I think the result is quite different from what we've seen before. And they are very cool about their approach. So they're not trying to become the next big thing, but they are very, very alert about their development. They try to bring something differently in their own way without trying to following step. So I think it's an interesting endeavor.
That's an interesting curveball to throw at me right at the end there. I was expecting to hear something along the lines of Acrivia or maybe even Crayon, like getting dropped in there. But Trilob is a brand that I think cool is maybe the way to define it, because I've never been a huge fan of the aesthetic of what they're putting out there. I know Alon is. He's a massive supporter of what they're doing, but I have to say that their quiet approach to marketing has really swayed me towards them in favor, at least, than I would have been if I'd had it shoved down my throat, like lesser brands have been tempted to do in the past, because they don't quite have the mechanical cojones to back up their statement, I would say. So it's an interesting one to shine a light on, but you make an even more interesting point in a almost tangential way when you were talking about Max and his pursuit of collaboration, and how at the time when he did it, it seemed like a remarkable step in a new direction. But you did mention that, of course, collaboration used to be the norm. And this relates back to our previous conversation about in-house movement manufacturing, the value that collectors or buyers might place upon it or otherwise. And for all of our listeners that don't understand what you meant by collaboration used to be the norm, could you just give a brief overview of what the watchmaking industry was like in the old days before perhaps it was rescued from the ashes after the quartz crisis?
Yes, sure. I think one of the virtues of the watchmaking is to be a lot of different arts and crafts that have to be put together. And I think the assumption is that nobody, even today, nobody will ever be able to have all the capabilities in-house, because it wouldn't make sense in terms of economics, but also in terms of skills necessary. So back in the day, you had the old, when the watchmaking was developing at the turn of the century, even until just before the quartz crisis, you have these farmer watchmakers, as we call them, in the mountains, that were actually farming, taking care of their animals during the summer, but during the winter, the months were cold and they had no job, and some of them started to work for some établisseurs. The établisseurs were the Gégère-Lecoultre of their time, and all these big corporations who actually asked these farmers a specific task. One would be tasked with doing the gears. Another one will specialize in balance wheels. Another one in whatever screws or whatever capability you could find. And so all these farmers were used by these établisseurs, and the farmers brought the result of their work to the établisseur, who was actually finishing the watch and selling it in the market. And so this was the start of the collaborative way of doing things, because you needed specialized skills to really build a watch that was making sense, using the best of each skills, and therefore having a high quality product, which was the thing that helped Switzerland establish themselves in the world. It's the quality, the sheer quality of their pieces. And then later down the road, some brands specialized in doing some parts of the movement. It was not farmers anymore, but actually companies. And you had hundreds of different companies formed on their specific skills that were selling their pieces to many different brands, sometimes even movements. Do I have to recall that even in the 70s and later, big and even iconic pieces from a very established brand were equipped with movements from another big name of the industry. So basically, the Royal Oak equipped with a Gégère-Lecoultre movement for quite some time.
That's amazing. And the longer we listen to you, the more passionate you become. Pascal, as usual, we can talk for hours. I kind of want to wrap up this amazing episode with a final question for our listeners that are collectors. You mentioned at the beginning of the episode that you guys offer trainings, mostly for industry professionals, but you've started opening it up to, let's say, end consumers, right? Collectors.
Yes.
So
yes.
Please educate us and them and direct them where they can apply for trainings that you offer.
Yes. So What we offer, as I told you, our academy is basically on watch culture and everything you need to know about watchmaking. If you're a watch nerd and you already know that much, like you, Alan, and you, Rob, well, you probably won't be much tempted by our trainings. But basically, we start from what we call the watch essentials, and it goes up the ladder through what we call the watchmaking workshops, when you take mechanical movement apart and bringing back together so that it ticks again. Those kind of classes are offered either in person or online. The best way is to go to our digital platform, so hautehorlogerie.org, when you will find our academy, and then you will find all the information about our courses there.
Do you offer them globally or only in Switzerland?
Well, since there are online classes, this is possible to register to different possible times. We haven't yet a very developed schedule, but classes come up regularly. So depending on your time zone, it should be possible to register somewhere.
That is what we like to hear, because a lot of our listeners, of course, are spread all over the globe, especially in America. So we might get some people flying over to come and say hello, Pascal. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for entertaining us and humoring us with our meandering route down memory lane in the watch industry and the movements and what they mean to you and to us all, anyone into collecting and following the hobby of loving wristwatches. If you would like to ask Pascal any questions or get involved in a future show, please get in touch with us. You can do so via Instagram. I'm there at RobNuds. That's ROBNUDDS. You can find Alon on Instagram at ALONBENJOSEPH, or you can contact us directly via email at either rob@therealtime.show or alon@therealtime.show. You can also find us on our contact form on our website, www.therealtime.show. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share the podcast. We'll be back next week with another Q&A session and another interview with one of watchmaking's finest. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.